What's up, booktube? It's Leah Cooper, and today I am bringing you another themed book rec list. So this video is a hashtag monthly book recs response video. Monthly book recs is a group I run over on Goodreads. Every month I provide a book recommendations topic, and these can range from the more specific to the more general. I aim to create prompts that are kind of a happy medium between the old monthly book recs Goodreads group and Top 5 Wednesday. You can interpret the prompts however you like. This month the topic is like nostalgia / kids books. So the main idea was to recommend things that either you have nostalgia for because they were favorites when you were a kid, or to recommend kids lit that you read as an adult. I did say that this included everything from kids chapter books, middle grade, or YA, but I did say I would love if we recommended more like kids chapter books in middle grade because I think those don't get talked about enough. So today I decided to recommend 7 things. 4 of those are going to be books that I have read as an adult. If you are a frequent watcher of my channel over the last couple of years, you will have seen me talk about these books before because I've read all of them within the last 4 years. And then 3 of them are actually book series that I'd like to recommend that I have not reread as an adult, but I have a lot of nostalgia for. They were favorite series when I was a kid, and also at least one of them, my niece, who is in 4th grade or 5th grade this year. She's in 4th or 5th. It's terrible. I know. I can't remember. I think she's in 5th grade this year. She's finishing 5th grade. She's currently reading one of these series and really enjoying it, so that's also why it's kind of popping back up on this list. I will leave a link to the Goodreads group down below if you are interested in checking it out and keeping up with the prompts. If you like these kind of videos or you want to get some recs from people, you can also check out the hashtag monthly book recs. I'll put that on the screen here. If you do make a recs video, please use that tag so I can find it and retweet you on Twitter. Okay. Let's get started. I'm going to start with the books that I have read more recently. So I've read them as an adult. I think they're really high quality and I would recommend them to a young reader. The first one I want to talk about is probably not super unknown. It popped up on the BookTube SFF Awards last year. So obviously there was a group of people reading it, but that is Small Spaces and Dead Voices. These are both by Catherine Arden. She wrote the Bear and the Nightingale trilogy, or I think that was called the Winter Night trilogy. So she is very well known on BookTube for that series. This is her middle grade horror series, and I loved these 2 books. I can't wait to read the 3rd one. They are about a small town group of friends. This first book, our protagonist is a little bit of an outsider. She's on a school trip and and she has this creepy premonition that something bad's gonna happen. I think there's something, it's been over a year since I read this, so I don't remember I'm fuzzy on the details, but something tells her that there's going to be a problem on this field trip to the pumpkin patch or whatever. They're on the bus grinds to a halt, and I think it's the bus driver, tells her to run or something, and I think you have to hide in small spaces. Is that it? Anyway, she and then 2 of her classmates, one of them being a girl who she initially really does not get along with, they flee, and there's scarecrows after them, and there's a crazy pumpkin man, and it's kids horror, and so for an adult probably it's not super scary. I found it kind of creepy because I'm a wimp when it comes to scary stuff, but I really love this series. I love the friendship that develops between the 3 friends. I thought they were all really strong, interesting characters. The second book deals with a haunted ski lodge, kind of locked in, snowed in mystery type horror thing. Loved that. The first book is very much focused on, I can't remember her name, the main girl. The second book has a lot more POV from the female friend, and I'm hoping that the 3rd book will have a much stronger POV from the male friend. And so that in addition to the main protagonist, basically. I think that's the theme I sense happening with like the structure of the books. I really liked these first two, and so I think if you have a kid, I never read the Goosebumps books, but I assume that this is kind of in the same vein as that. If you have a young reader who's interested in that kind of stuff, I would highly recommend these. And if you're an adult, I would still highly recommend them. I found them really entertaining. Like, I think I read both of them in a day, couldn't put them down. The next book I want to recommend is also a middle grade book, and I actually have a full review for this book on my channel, and that's Riverland by Fran Wilde. I read this, I want to say last summer. It's about two sisters. They have an extremely emotionally abusive father and a mother who tries to pretend that he's not, basically. It's another one of these like fantasy magical realism kind of stories where like they can cross over to this other land, the Riverland, where there are creatures and there's like trash monsters, and in their reality, their father is trying to like do this land deal, basically buy up all this property, and like the Riverland, the like trash queen of the Riverland is like trying to break down the barriers between the worlds, and so like in their reality their house keeps like breaking and flooding. But I would say a lot of this is a metaphor for like what's happening at home. And I think that the experiences of the two girls having an extremely emotionally manipulative and emotionally abusive parent is not something I see a lot, and really, really resonated. I don't want to get into it too much, but it really resonated, and I thought it was a really good representation of that and kind of dealing with that in the book. So yeah, like I said, I have a full review if you're curious about more of the details, since that review I wrote and put together when the book was fresher in my mind. I would suggest you check it out. I'll have it linked in the cards and down below. But I really liked this book. I thought it was a great blend of kind of contemporary issues and a really interesting, cool fantasy world. A little bit of like a portal fantasy element, basically. And then the third book I want to mention, I do own a copy, but I have to remember where it is, since my shelves are organized by color, and it had like couple colors on the cover. Let me see if I can find it. So the third thing I want to mention is going to be The Glasstown Game by Catherine M. Valente. And yes, this was in the blue cubby because this cover, come on camera, focus on the cover, is just barely light blue. Good job, self, past self. You've probably heard of Catherine M. Valente. She's pretty well known. She's written a fair few books. I wanted to recommend this book. I have not read her Fairyland series. So she has a series that's an actual middle grade series called the Fairyland books. The first one is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making, I think is the title. I have not actually read that series. I haven't had time to kind of, because when I approach that series, I want to be able to read all of them in a go, basically, and I haven't had time to do that yet. And that one gets recommended a lot because it's very, very well loved. This is her standalone middle grade novel, and I read this a couple of years ago, and this is fantastic. This is something I would have loved as a kid. And also, can we just talk about how beautiful this dust jacket is? Like, I don't know if you can really see the details of the town at the bottom, but oh, it's so lovely. It has really adorable end papers too. This book is a fictionalized fantasy about the Bronte siblings. So we're talking Charlotte, Anne, Emily, and their brother, whose name I can't remember. Branwell. And obviously the Brontes are extremely well known for Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre and Agnes Grey, etc. It's documented that they had this game called the Glasstown Game, which was an invented game they would play with toy soldiers. And it was just children playing pretend about the Napoleonic Wars, basically. So this book predicates a real place of the Glasstown Game. And so basically Charlotte and Emily are going to get on a train to go back to the boarding school where they stayed where their two eldest sisters died. Like the Brontes had kind of a tragic childhood and also actually adult life. Like all of them died quite young, and Branwell I think became an alcoholic. But anyways, they're supposed to get on this train to go back to school, but the train ends up taking them to Glasstown, which is their invented world, and all of the people who populate Glasstown are like paper cutout people, and they kind of get swept up into this war between Napoleon and their version of, I'm gonna forget his name, not Cromwell, whoever the English hero of the Napoleonic Wars is. I don't remember. I read this book several years ago. It is absolutely charming and delightful. It's super chonky. It's such a delightful read. It's very interesting because you can see how much, I can't remember if it's Charlotte, I think it's Charlotte, really hated Jane Austen. I think Jane Austen is a character in this, like in Glasstown, or there's a character kind of you can tell is based off of Austen. It's very funny. It's just funny. It's super charming and delightful. If you have a reader who likes fantasy, especially like historical fantasy, I think this is a great book, and I don't really see anyone talking about this on booktube. I feel like this kind of flew under the radar. And if you are an adult reader who at all likes the Brontes, I think this is an utterly charming little middle grade fantasy book, and it's written beautifully because it's Valente. I don't think it's overly dense or overwritten like some of her other works. I definitely think it is accessible to a young reader, and maybe if some of her other books have been too dense for your taste, this might be a better thing to try from her. And then the last book I'm going to recommend is a YA novel, and I read this book, gosh, I want to say 4 years ago. I read it pretty early on in my channel. That's Bone Gap by Laura Ruby. I will fully admit that I am very fuzzy on the details of this book. I haven't seen a ton of people talk about it, and I do think it was just an extraordinary and very quick read. It's about two brothers. One of them is over 18. He's an adult, and I think he has custody of his younger brother who's in high school, who's like 17 or 18 or something. And the elder brother was dating a woman named Rosa, who a few months back disappeared. And I think the town thinks she kind of just ran off, but the younger brother is convinced that something bad happened to her. The younger brother, who is our protagonist, is named Finn. I had to look that up. He's considered really strange according to the school, and I remember he has face blindness, and I can't remember if he's written as being a little bit on the spectrum. I feel like he was. At the very least, he has face blindness, which I thought was done really well and is not something you see a lot in books outside of maybe, I don't know, thrillers. And it interferes with how he connects with people and how he makes relationships with people. I think he finds that very difficult to do, and he's kind of considered a little bit weird and a little bit of a loner, and because of it, though he's not necessarily unpopular, because I do think he's supposed to be like the prettiest boy in school or something like that. Anyway, and so he's kind of just going about his life. There's this gulf between him and his brother since Rosa disappeared. There is another girl who Finn eventually befriends. I just remember she's not considered like pretty or popular, but she's really cool, and he has a crush on her. That's really all I remember. And also she's like an assistant beekeeper or something. It's really cool. There's this like one scene where she's called in to, because there's like a what is it when bees swarm, because like they like when a colony divides and then the bees will swarm after a new queen. She's called in to like take the little swarm and go put it somewhere where they can actually make a real hive and not someone's car or something like that. Anyway, so this is just like a really interesting book, and there is a speculative kind of magical realism element to it that I can't go into because I don't remember all of the details, But I do think that this was like a completely underhyped book. If you like Anna Marie McLemore, I think you would really like this book. It definitely has that same kind of sense, blending of our world and like kind of another world just beneath the skin of our world. And it has like a very like warm, dreamy, small town feeling to it, which I find is very common in Anna Marie McLemore's books. So yeah, I think if you like her and you've never tried Bone Gap, it's worth trying out. And again, like I said, Bone Gap was nominated, or it was a finalist for like a National Book Award, and yet I don't think I've ever really seen anyone talk about it on BookTube. And maybe I'm just not following the right people, but that's my impression. So I'm going to recommend it here. Now, quickly, on to my last 3 recommendations, which are book series that I have nostalgia for, which I have not read as an adult. So I can't just wholeheartedly recommend them, because obviously I am a very different reader than when I was a kid. But those 3 book series are going to be, first of all, the original OG Jedi Apprentice book series. I read these, probably I was too old to really be reading these. These are like pretty young kids chapter books, probably ages 8 to 12. I was definitely reading them around like 12 or 13, on like the higher end of that scale. But I really loved this series as a kid, as a Star Wars fan. And obviously I know that there's a lot of probably new kid Star Wars books, especially like maybe like Clone War books out. But this original series, it follows a young Padawan Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the first book details him trying to become Qui-Gon Jinn's apprentice. And I loved it. I think I read the first 10 or 12 or 13 of these. I don't exactly know how far I got into the series, but I thought they were great. Lots of great adventures. And for like a young Star Wars fan, I would highly recommend them. At least looking back on them with my nostalgia glasses, there might be some objectionable stuff in them. I don't really know. They're published by Scholastic. That's really all I can tell you, except that I really liked them. I had a friend who also read them around the same time, and I was like reading these as well as like the adult extended universe novels from like the 90s and the 2000s, you know, like the Kevin J. Anderson, Barbara Hambly books, right? And I just gobbled all of this stuff up. Then the next series I want to mention, I don't have any copies of because I actually sold all of my copies of this series. I regret doing that now because my niece is of the age where she could have been reading them, and she loves horses, but it is what it is. And I got like $100 for them, which, man, I really got taken advantage of on Craigslist. But anyways, that series is the Saddle Club series, and I'm going to specifically talk about like the original Saddle Club books, like the first 100 of them. I don't know how many there are. I don't know if they're still writing them. I don't know if they have ghostwriters. Probably, because there's like a billion of these, or at least there were, because I think they were still coming out with them. I probably read the first 50 or so of these, maybe the first 70. Let me double check. Let me see how many of these there are. Okay, so apparently there's like 101 in the main series. I feel like I read at least the first 50. Except that I'm looking at this and like I definitely read like 86 and 87. Okay, so like I didn't necessarily read every single book between like 100 and 86, but I read a lot of them, let's say, because I was really into horses. So this book series is for like, if you go by the I can't remember, they're rated like a 3.6, I think, to like a 4 in reading scale difficulty. They're for ages like 7 to 10. I read them when I was older, though. So here's the thing. I remember trying to read the Saddle Club when I was like the appropriate age for it, like the 7 to 10 age, and I found them really boring. And I was an advanced reader, so it wasn't like that I couldn't understand them. I couldn't get into them. I was reading the Thoroughbred books at the same time. Really loved those. But then when I was older, I picked up a Saddle Club book kind of like at random, to like as something just randomly to read. And I think this was in like 5th or 6th, or I was it 7th grade. I was like it was well past 10. And I loved them. Now, they were super easy to read at that level, but like I suddenly got why they were so good, and like they were so funny. So I don't know if I'd give them to like a 7 to 10 reader, or kind of like give them to someone who is a little bit on the higher end, because I do feel like there's elements to them that like an older reader might enjoy more. And also I feel like the girls were like 14, 15. So reading them at like 12, I think was like a much better age gap for me, because generally kids like to read about characters who are a little bit older than them. So that was my experience. So the Saddle Club books are about 3 girls who are taking riding lessons at the stable, who eventually become friends. And I think in the very first one, there's 2 of them who are already friends. And there's a 3rd girl who's like new at the stable. And she's kind of like, she's a little uptight, a little bit like Annie from Community. And, but she eventually befriends them. And it's basically just them dealing with like school life issues and like riding and horse issues or barn issues. I know I do remember they were always like trying to like raise money so that they could like, you know, go to a show or something like that. I don't really remember the details, but they're fundamentally it's a book series about friendship and girls who love horses, right? So if you ever have a little person who likes horse books, I do highly recommend this series. I think it's really wholesome and great. It introduced me to my love of pistachio ice cream, and I think they're really funny. And then the last book series I want to recommend is another horse series. And this is one I have a lot of nostalgia for, but I do recognize that it's an older series, so it could potentially be problematic, because I have not in fact, I know it's going to be problematic, but I have not gone back and reread it yet, so I can't speak to where it falls on a product of its time scale kind of thing. That's going to be the Black Stallion series by Walter Farley. So my niece is actually currently reading those. Like I said, she's in 5th-ish grade, and she really loves horses, and she started working her way through these. I think she was on Son of the Black Stallion last time I checked, which is the 3rd book, I think. So not all of these are created equal. Some of these I think are kind of dull. I specifically remember Man-O-War being a really dull addition to the series. However, for the most part, I really enjoyed this series, and there's a couple that stick out in my memory as being especially good. The very out of print, though maybe it's been reissued, Black Stallion Mystery. It was the last one, and it almost had like this weird like apocalyptic element to it. Black Stallion's Ghost, another one that was like not reprinted for a really long time and was hard to get. It was great. It dealt with like the southeast bayou and like a ghost in a swamp and stuff. Anyway, there are 2 movies actually, with Mickey Rooney in them, which you can watch if you're interested. Basically, the first book is about a boy. He's traveling back home to England. I think he's from England, and he's shipwrecked along with a horse from the boat. He's like the only survivor, and they're on this island, kind of like he sort of befriends / tames the horse, who he calls the Black. They get rescued. He takes the horse home with him, and then he meets a crusty old racing trainer who teaches them how to run in a race, because the Black is like the fastest horse ever. And of course, it turns out that the Black is like this really not expensive, but it's worth a lot of money to the Bedouin tribe who owned him, like breeding stock kind of thing. And Alec does go to Arabia and races and like across the desert and like the Bedouin Arabian horse race. So there's definitely like, I don't know how well that's handled because I haven't read it since I was a kid. Like, I don't know how bad the like imperial British colonizer stuff is in this series, which is why I'm like, I can't just wholeheartedly recommend this because I don't know. But that's just the book. And there's a couple other threads. There's definitely like, they breed the Black. There's a lot of horse racing. There's another story with another kid who's like, who like is vacationing, and he finds this band of wild horses on an island. That's the Island Stallion, or is it the Island Stallion Races or another book? Anyway, so there's a couple of different like storylines that kind of intermesh. But yeah, my niece is really loving them, and I really loved them as a kid. So if you have, again, another horse lover, it might be a series it's worth checking out. Okay, that's everything I have for you today. Hopefully you've gotten some recs either for yourself or for a young reader in your life. And if you have any questions about these books, feel free to drop them down below. Let me know, were you a crazy horse kid who read a bunch of horse books, or was that just me? And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.